Welcome everyone. This is a book review of Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis. We're in Book 2, Chapter 2, The Invasion. In Chapter 1, Book 2, Lewis concluded that atheism is too simple because if the whole universe has no meaning, we should never have found out that it has no meaning. It makes perfect sense because if there's no meaning, why would anyone even think about the meaning of something that there's no meaning in it? And this is the knowledge that he used. If there were no light in the universe and therefore no creatures with eyes, we should never know it was dark, because darkness or even light would be a word without meaning. You don't even know that light exists. That means everything is, by definition, dark, and darkness has no significance or meaning if there's nothing to compare with. So again, if there's no meaning in this universe, there's no point of asking if there's good or evil or any meaning in this world. And he introduces another view in this chapter, and he called it as Christianity and water. It says, there is a good God in heaven and everything else is all right. So, okay, we believe that there's God out there, but everything else, as is okay. Things happen in life. What can we do? Let's move on. Let's love each other and forgive, and everything has to be all relative. Understand each other. It all sounds good, but that's too simplistic to look at this world. And he said both atheism and Christianity and water view are leaving out all the difficult doctrines, such as sin, hell, the devil, and the redemption. All those things that people talk about, the meaning of life, it's all left out from these views. So he said it's no good to ask for a simple religion or simple religious views about the meaning of life. And I believe everyone agrees with this. After all, real things are not that simple. It can get really complex and complicated. Understanding the reality. There's some options out there. He said a child saying a child's prayer looks simple. If you're content to stop there, well and good. That's fine. Then we don't have to think too much about this meaning of life or meaning of universe. Just take everything at its face value and we can move on. But he said if you want to go and ask what is really happening, however, we must be prepared for something difficult. So he introduced another concept in this chapter called dualism. As the name indicates, there are two different and independent powers going against each other or in balance in this world. Some other cultures call it yin and yang concept. So it basically believes two independent powers exist. It doesn't mean one is better than the other. We need both, and sometimes one is dominating the other, but eventually we have to find the balance. But when we call one of them is the good and the other is the bad, it presents us two different views. First one is we may say what we prefer is good. So when we say one is good and the other is bad, then we prefer one over the other. And the other option is one of them is actually good or bad. And people may agree with us because they may say, oh, that's right. That one is the good and the other is the bad. But if you simply express your preference, though, then there's no point of speaking of good and evil at all because everyone has different preferences. I may prefer A over B. Some other people may prefer B over A. There's no right or wrong in that situation because it's purely subjective preference that we're expressing here. Second option, if one of them is actually good or bad, we're introducing a third thing in addition to the two equally independent powers. It's not just those two competing concepts and making balances against each other, but we're saying basically there's one choice that's better than the other. There's something that is telling us which one is good or bad. That's not one of those two powers, because those two equally independent powers don't dictate which one's right or wrong. So since the two powers are judged by the third, it is higher than these two and above and beyond these two powers. And we can call this as the real standard or the real God out there. And he continues with the dualism. His conclusion is this: whether you like it or not, one can be good for the sake of goodness. Right, sometimes people know, okay, I don't want to do this, but I want to be good. So they go against their own feelings and will at the moment and be good. However, one cannot be bad for the mere sake of badness. Of course, there's some exceptions out there, some issues in human minds, of course, but in a general term, we cannot be just bad for the mere sake of badness all the time. And he compared dualism with Christianity, which agrees with dualism that this universe is at war, but it does not think this is a war between independent powers. Because if it's between independent powers, there's no right or wrong or fair or unfair. It's more like a balancing act between those two powers. We don't have to pick a side. And now he introduces more of Christian value. It says Christianity believes it is a civil war, a rebellion, and that we are living in a part of the universe occupied by the rebel. The universe occupied by the rebel, he explained it this way: enemy occupied territory, this is what we live in, the world. And the story of how the rightful king has landed and is calling us to take part in this campaign of sabotage against this evil power. So he said, when you go to church, you are really listening in to the secret wireless from our friends. The right king, who was he? And why are we here? There's a meaning in our lives. So church, if they do the right job, they're supposed to teach and preach those concepts and how we're supposed to live on this earth. That's why the enemy works so hard to prevent us from going to church by playing on our conceit, laziness, and intellectual snobbery. Yeah, I know what's going on. I don't have to go to church. It's an old-fashioned story or people made up story that we're hearing, so I don't need to go there. And all kinds of tactics the enemy uses against people who want to go to church. And I just want to provide you with a little insight from the Bible. It's Ephesians chapter 6, verse 12. It says, "For we do not wrestle against the flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers over this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places." This is a very good description of the enemy that C.S. Lewis is referring to. So in chapter 3, Lewis will discuss interesting topics, including the dark power and free will. So that's it for today. And if you have any questions or comments, please leave them under the video. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you all in Book 2, Chapter 3, The Shocking Alternative.